Hey, what's up, Larissa?
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Good.
Did you guys have a good weekend?
Yeah.
Sweet. Oh, you're muted.
I'm still hoping it'll snow.
I know. It was kind of a tease. It like sort of snowed,
Yeah,
but not really. It's like
I
already
know.
gone. Makes me sad.
I know. There's just something about going through an entire winter where it doesn't hit the ground in the valley, and I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird. It's been like really dry.
Hmm.
Like worse than I've remembered it in a while.
Yeah, it's bad. And it is really scary for the summer because it's going to be a hot summer with no water, and
Yeah,
that's never
bad
good.
sign. Let's see. All right. Well, we got a nice small crew today, which is cool. So I'll just get started, and if some other people show up, then awesome. If not, that is totally cool as well. So, um, all right. So I want to ask you guys a question. What do you know about Webpack, and what are you hoping to get out of this today?
I was kind of hoping. I feel like I will find out that I know things about it that I didn't know I knew. And so that's kind of my hope at being here right now is finding out what I didn't know I know and learning a lot more. So
Okay. So what do you know? And
I'm
then
not
maybe
sure.
Okay.
that's my whole point. I'm not sure, but
Okay.
I know that it's something I've talked about like with my husband and stuff, and like
Mhm.
yeah.
So, if you were to if this were an interview, what
Oh
would
crap.
you
No.
what would you tell the person if they were like, "What's Webpack?"
My assumption is
What would your answer be?
my answer would be that this is what I think it is, and now I feel like I'm going to say something stupid, but that Webpack
That's all right.
is a pack of different files or kind of, I assume it's kind of like a library of things that come, I mean, is it kind of like your Webpack that just comes with the tools you need for I don't know. See, this is awful for me.
That's all right. You would
Take a
I'm
crack
probably
at that.
inspired
fail that
already.
interview question, but that's okay.
Yeah, I totally would have failed.
But this is why we do this.
Can I take a
And
crack at that
go
that
ahead.
interview question?
Go ahead.
See, I think Webpack is a bundler, so it allows you to take a bunch of different JavaScript files, CSS or HTML files, and kind of bundle it into a package. Or I think in the way that Create React app uses it, it's what kind of compiles all the JSX, etc., into kind of compatible code on, or more compatible code maybe.
Okay. That's a pretty that definitely gets to the core of it a little bit. So one thing to remember about it is that it's not necessarily it's a completely unopinionated tool. It doesn't really know or care what files you're doing. I mean, obviously it's a JavaScript bundler, so it's geared towards JavaScript, but it's pretty much a free for all as far as uh, what your goal is. So React and Angular and other frameworks use Webpack, or at least like Create React app and some of the frameworks that use React and Angular and stuff, they use Webpack under the hood to do all that bundling. So, but the key is that it's a bundler. So Webpack is just an NPM package, and it's a bundler, which just means that it takes disparate files, bundles them together into some other format. So it transpiles JavaScript, bundles whatever files you have into some other form. It could be one file. It could be condensed into, several smaller files. Doesn't really matter. But the key is that it's a bundler. And the way it works is essentially you tell Webpack where your so you can think of your file tree, right? You've got your source code, you have your index.js or your main.js, whatever your entry point is, that's the root of your file tree. And it branches off from there, and everything is kind of importing things from other places, and you have this dependency tree that kind of just branches out. So essentially what you're doing with Webpack is saying, hey, Webpack, start from the root of the tree, and as you follow the imports, I'm going to give you a set of rules to follow, so that when you encounter some sort of import or dependency, you know what to do with it. So all you're doing is giving it a set of rules to follow as it's parsing through your dependency tree. And that's why it's called a bundler, because it's taking all these disparate dependencies and packaging them together. So it's really useful for, the reason why it exists is because various browsers, various production environments or whatever may be more or less equipped to deal with certain versions of JavaScript engines or whatever. And you may be writing your code, you may be developing on some super new version of the language, but the environment that you're deploying it to is older, for example, and maybe doesn't have all those features. And so you need to be able to convert or transpile your fancy code back into a legacy format that can be understood by whatever context you're deploying your thing in. So it's really useful for that.
So can I try the interview again?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm at the interview again. So Webpack is something that's going to help me if I have code that maybe I need to make sure I can get it onto another computer or format that's either newer. Maybe I've got some enterprise technology and I need to make sure that I can compile that. And so Webpack is a bundler that will help me get my files. That'll take my disparate files and transpile them. And with that, I can make sure that I get them, and it'll take my root file and help those files follow kind of a set of rules and get and kind of parse through my files and get them all set up so that they can be bundled and transpiled correctly and read in the new location.
Right. Essentially, yeah. And transpiling is not a necessary step.
Okay.
You could take, because for example, if the place that you are running your code is running the same version as the one that you're developing, then there's not really necessarily a need to transpile it. Like, for example, if you're not using TypeScript, then you don't need to transpile it back to JavaScript. Like if you're just using plain good old ES5 JavaScript, sometimes you just need to bundle it and you don't necessarily need to transpile it. But the beauty of Webpack is that the process by which it bundles can be arbitrarily configured.
So it can determine that.
Yes, so it's first and foremost a bundler, but then there are configurations and plugins that allow you to also transpile as part of that process.
Okay, cool.
Yep, it's pretty cool. All right, so let's do some examples. Now that you kind of have a general idea of the concept. So let me share my screen. Okay, and I'm going to start from I'm starting from scratch here, so you can kind of see how you can, like, how you go about setting this up. And I'm going to have to reference the docs a few times. I don't remember every little detail of Webpack, but that's what the documentation is for. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to start our, so this is just a node project. Okay. So let's start a little node project here. Create a Git repository as well. I'll make sure to ignore our node modules when we install them. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install Webpack as well as the Webpack CLI. They're you kind of run them in tandem. Webpack is the actual bundler. Webpack CLI is kind of the command line interface that lets us kind of bundle things easier, or conveniently, I should say. Okay, and you'll notice that I intentionally saved it as a dev dependency, because this is not, our code doesn't directly use Webpack. We're just using Webpack as a tool to take our source code and convert it into some other form. Okay, so it is, as convention, it's useful to have a folder with our source code. So by convention, we tend to use src. And in here, again, conventionally, we will use JS, index.js. Okay, and we'll just tell our package.json that our entry point is this main file path right here, source index. Okay, cool. So for now, what we'll do is we'll just say console log hello world. Okay, here's our sweet code. So the key for using Webpack is we have to provide a way. There's two important steps. One is to define where Webpack should start bundling from, and where it should output it from. And there is an in-between step, which is configuring how it gets from step A to step B, but let's start with where we start the bundling and where the bundle should end up. So we will create a file called webpack.config.js. So this is, I'm dyslexic apparently. Webpack, there we go. Okay, so this is the conventional name. So basically the Webpack CLI will actually, by default, search for a file called this when it's doing its magic. You can tell it to, if you don't want to use that name, you can tell it to use a different name, but this is just the default name that it looks for. Okay, so now the purpose of this is, oh, hey, Lainey. Nice of you to join us. So, so what we have to do in this file is export our rules for what Webpack should follow to do its bundling. So just like anything, it's just another normal JavaScript file. There's nothing fancy here. We just need to make sure to export a object that matches the schema that Webpack is expecting. So this is where I need to look at the documentation because I forget some of the names of these. All right, and their documentation is fantastic, I gotta say. I can't say that about every library I've used, but Webpack is pretty fantastic. It's a little overwhelming too, because it's a lot of information, but it's really laid out very well. So I would highly recommend after this, if you're interested in learning a little bit more, go here and check out start here. So this is where I'm going to go. So the first thing we're going to do is we have to define the entry. Okay, so this just says, this is a file path that says, hey, start bundling from here. Okay, so the default value is source index.js. So we don't technically need to put it here, but I like to anyways, just for peace of mind. Okay, so that's the default. Okay, the next thing is to tell it the output. So this is the file that is going to, or this is the place where where the bundle is going to be created. So by default, again, it's just dist/main.js. But again, I kind of like to explicitly put it in there. Okay, so output. Okay, so we're going to say output, and then our path is going to be, so we're going to use the fancy path library to tell us to get our absolute path to where it should create this file in. So we'll just use the built-in path library here. And we're just going to say path.resolve. Dir name is just where we are currently. And then the file is going to be called dist, or the folder is going to be called dist. Okay. And now the file name, and we can call this whatever we want, but let's just use the default. So we can call it whatever we want. And it's also not a bad idea to suffix it with the bundle keyword. Just so looking at a glance, it's obvious that this is our bundle. Okay, so this is really the basic. This is all you need to get started. And because these are default values, aside from this, we could have just run this without this configuration file to begin with. But I think I like having a visual of what I'm doing. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just bundle this guy up. So the way to do that is we can, so we've got a couple options. We could download the Webpack CLI globally and just call things like Webpack and then say, hey, bundle this project. I tend to not like doing global installs of node modules, just because versioning can get kind of weird if you've got a different version in your project from your global module, then you potentially could have problems. So what we're going to do is we're going to just write some scripts that we can just run in our terminal. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a script called Webpack. Okay, and this is just going to say, this just says, run the Webpack CLI starting from this project. And it will, this is basically the path to the root where, or the path to where this Webpack config.js lives. Obviously, we're just in the root of the folder, so it's just a single period. So let's run it. Let's see what happens. What did I do wrong? I'm missing a step. What did I do wrong? Sorry, one sec. Okay. Oh, you know what? Maybe I don't even need that. Oh. Can't resolve source index. Let me look. Maybe I did a wrong path. We'll get there eventually. There we go. Okay, so we'll ignore this little warning here for a second. You can use Webpack for, like in general, if you are running like a development build, meaning that you're just planning on deploying this just like maybe for your engineering team to use internally, you'll probably have a different build process than if you were building it to like ship off to a customer. So you can do things in different modes and stuff. We won't worry about that today though. The important thing is to notice that we've got a new folder hanging out with us. So just like we said create a folder called dist with a file name called main.bundle.js, and let's see what we've got. Hey, look at that, there it is. And if we look at this file, it's basically a copy of this file. So we haven't really done anything that fancy yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to pretend like this is some real project. So, you know, normally you've got a whole tree of files that are related to each other through imports and exports and stuff. So in this case, we're going to add a file. I'm going to call this lib as library. So we'll just pretend that we're, this is our library that we're using for our, contains methods for doing helpful things. So we'll just export a function here called say hello. And this will just be a function that says console log. Okay, and then what we'll do is instead of this console log, we'll just go ahead and get our function from. So we're going to get it from our lib file. It's called say hello. Okay, so now our file is importing something. So we've got the start of we've got kind of a real project starting now. So let's run our Webpack command again, and let's see what happens. Okay. Here, Look at that. That's fancy. So that looks like some legit, code right there, right? So now we don't need to worry about specifically everything that's going on here. We just know that it's been minified and that it's clearly been put through some parsing process to take these individual files and kind of combine them. As you can see, here's that file, or here's that object that has our methods on it, our utility functions, and then there's all this other crap, right? At some point, some functions are getting called. Cool. So this is cool because if I were to run this file, I would expect to see hello world. So let's try it. I'm gonna run this file. And then this is called main bundle.js. There you go. It worked. Very cool. Okay, well, let's try some things. So now normally we're used to, now this is like good old fashioned vanilla Node JavaScript, right? We're using require, we're not using imports or exports. Let's see what happens if we try to do that though. So I'm gonna go ahead and change this up a little bit. So instead of doing it that way, we're going to say const, and then I'll take this guy. Okay, so now we've just got a slightly different, we're using a different syntax that's a little newer. This is the ES syntax, which I believe you guys are probably familiar with. So let's go over here, and now we'll make sure to I'll just do import, or no, I still want to keep that there. Okay. So we'll go ahead and import. Better say hello. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to run this code straight from the source and see, and we're going to see what happens. Okay. So we've got ourselves an error, right? It's a syntax error. Cannot use import statement outside a module. So we got a syntax problem, even though this is perfectly valid syntax, right? Now what this error specifically is saying, like if I had an exports here, const export x equals 10. Oh wait, I don't need that. Yeah, so this just isn't working. So we've got to, so this is where a bundler can be useful, because we can take the code in this form and combine it into this form. So let's run our Webpack thing again, and let's see what we get. Oh, what's wrong command? All right, let's see what we got now. Okay. And we're going to run it. Run our dist main bundle, and there it is. It worked. So by default, Webpack can handle this. We don't have to actually explicitly do any fancy stuff. It'll just kind of work. So any questions up to this point? I know Danny's going to be back in just a sec. He had to switch computers. All right.
I don't have questions. It's just like, I'm actually listening in, Ben.
Hmm.
Hi.
What's up, Laney?
Not much. I'm actually going to start coding after work tomorrow. I'm pretty excited to jump back in. So I'm trying to listen in actively.
Nice. That is exciting.
I'm very excited.
Have fun.
Say what?
Oh, I was saying that sounds fun. I don't
Oh.
have any questions at the moment.
Cool.
Following along. Sounds good.
Cool. All right. So now let's see how we're going to apply this to like an actual HTML document. So right now this is all in Node, right? So however, suppose I want to build a website, right? But I don't want to write my JavaScript all in one file. I still want to be able to compartmentalize my code. But as you know, or exporting and importing is not as easy. Although HTML imports and exports have actually gotten quite a bit better. There are module scripts that you can now run, which is actually kind of cool. But anywho, let's see how we can apply this to an actual HTML page. So we can't do something. Well, let's see what happens if I make an HTML file, and we'll just attach a script here. And what we're going to do is we're going to tell our source to be our source index, and let's just see what happens. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're now going to grab the we're going to make a little header here, okay, and we'll just put some text in there. So let's grab our H1. There's Danny back. Welcome back, Danny.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
All good. Okay, so what we're gonna do, so Danny, you didn't miss too much. All we did was switch our module exports to export syntax, and it doesn't hurt. And when we run Webpack, it works beautifully out of the box.
Cool.
So now what we're gonna do is we're going to, so I've created this HTML file, and we're going to now just put some text in there. So we're just gonna say H1 inner text equals that. Okay, pretty simple. Now, the thing is if I try to, let's just see what happens when I run this script tag. Or when I run this with my little live server thing. All right, so it's not looking promising. Oh, we got some console errors. There's that same error. Cannot use import statement outside a module. Well, that's a bummer. So let's bundle our code first. and then see what happens. So instead of referencing our source file now, we're going to reference our dist file. Okay. Now let's see what happens. There it is. Oh, and I just realized I got to change my, I said console log. This should just be a string. There we go. Okay.
Got to rebundle it. Though.
And now we got to rebundle. Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yeah, because it's like, why isn't it working? It's because our source code is still whatever the last bundle was. Now, of course, there are ways to have it listen to file changes and automatically update, and we'll get to that in a second. So let's rebundle. Beautiful. Okay, now as you can see, our code is updated. Hey, there it is.
Nice.
Pretty cool. Okay. So now there's
So
a couple.
Can I ask
Go
a
ahead.
question?
Go ahead.
So in reality, it's like you have your source folder with a bunch of different JavaScript files that all work together to create the functionality you're going for. And then obviously in this case, we have an index HTML file that just is going to reference sort of the bundled code. And so that's kind of, you basically just deploy the index file with that bundled JavaScript file kind of idea.
Right.
Cool.
Right. So there is a downside to this because, well, now I've got kind of this weird problem where my indexed HTML is living here, but my dist folder is over here. So maybe we should move it into here. Let's see what that does. Okay, and we'll go over here now. Obviously, this isn't dist anymore. We are in dist, so we can now just reference it next to each other. Okay, this seems promising. We're going to run this guy again.
It's going to get overwritten.
And it's actually fine. It won't override it. There is a setting that you can do, but there is a way that you can have it override every time. And usually that is what you want to do. But we won't worry about that at the moment. Right now, it's good enough to know that, okay, well, I guess we can just put our index HTML right in here, which is convenient because that means that we can literally just ship this folder out wherever we need to. This becomes kind of our like black box or whatever, where we can pack it's packaged up nicely. We can literally serve it from anywhere. So if I were to open that with live server, there it is. Still there. The only problem with this is that a lot of the times you may, so one downside of this is that you may have like CSS or let's say you have, favicons and other images and things like that, like that you use in your source file, right? So let's say, for example, that you want to be able to have like some CSS, right? You could totally do this. There's nothing to stop you from doing this. And I could then do this. And link here. You know, no problem. That'll work. The only problem is that if you're using like SCSS, for example, or you're using images, but you're also importing them into JavaScript, like in React, for example, you've probably done stuff like this, where it's like, hey, import my, I don't know, my user icon from icon PNG or something, right? Like maybe something like that. And then that user icon is now your path to whatever that image is. But the problem is that this path is different than the bundled one, right? So I would somehow, in my index HTML, I'd have to manually put in references to my images, right? I'd have to like, they'd have to be in here. I'd have to like add my picture here, and then in my style sheet, I could reference them and stuff. But like, wouldn't you want it so that anytime you imported something from anywhere, that it would just automatically get part of the bundle? Wouldn't that be convenient?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would. That's the
Or
correct
one
answer.
other example was like I think it's like, is it pre or post CSS, which is like we'll add all the prefixes, like vendor
Mhm.
prefixes to your CSS styles or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Like there's a CSS modules or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's all this stuff that basically the whole idea here is that I don't want to have to mess around in here. That's the whole purpose of this. This should just be spat out at the end. I shouldn't have to worry about it. So that's where the power of Webpack really comes in. So we're going to kind of take a look at some things here. So what I'm going to do is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to dynamically generate this HTML file. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just to follow the pattern that Create React App uses, we're going to create a folder called public. And we're just going to move this index HTML file into there. Okay, and now we don't know what the script is going to be. Okay, we don't know what this is going to be called necessarily. We do in this case, obviously, but we're just gonna take that out for now. Okay. So I think the first plugin that everyone uses, or the first one that everyone learns when they're learning Webpack, is what's called HTML Webpack plugin. So the general idea here is the purpose of this configuration file at the end of the day is to say, for any given file type that we encounter during an import, as the bundler is crawling through the dependency tree, we need to tell it what to do or how to process that particular file type. So if it's a CSS file, we want to process it using XYZ rule. If it's an SCSS file, we want to process it using an SCSS compiler. Or if or maybe we want to take every JSX file and apply Babel to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to say, we're going to define some rules here. Okay, and we're going to go back to this. Okay. Where is it? Which one is it? I forget which one it is. Should be in plugins. Where's the oh, here, I forget, it's over here. Okay. So there's a ton of plugins that are all used for various things. This one is pretty much universal. You're going to see this in just about every Webpack configuration. And these are all just separate modules, separate libraries. So we got to install these. So we're going to go ahead and install this guy. All right, so let's go ahead and import it into our project. Okay. I'm capitalizing this because this is actually a constructor function that we get. Okie dokie. So as you can see here, we're using, we're going to add this property called plugins. And what this does, so you know what we're even doing this for, is essentially this generates a new HTML file based on a template. And then whatever bundles we end up using, it will automatically add like the scripts or the links, all those things that we would have manually had to do if we wanted to use that asset or file in our HTML. And so sorry, we're gonna come back to the rules in a second. I skipped a step. So plugins, new Webpack, new HTML Webpack plugin. Okay, so there are some options here. Now by default, I believe it just automatically looks for a file called index.html. But here's some options we can pass to HTML Webpack plugin. Most of these you can kind of ignore, but most of these are just like either Booleans or like file paths or things. The key here though is we can tell it, what title we want to use for our document. We can tell it where to write the HTML file to and what it's called. Obviously, it defaults to index.html. And then our template tells us, or this says, hey, point to an HTML file that we want to use or start as a template. So that's what we're going to use right now. We're just going to say template. And since we've got our file in public, we're just going to go ahead and say path off. Actually, I think a relative path works here. Public HTML. Okay. Yep. Okay, cool. So let me get rid of that guy. I'm going to get rid of the dist folder just for now, and we're going to bundle our stuff again. So let's go ahead and run our command. Let's see what happens. Okay, seems like it's successful. Okay, check it out. So now we've got a copy of our HTML. And it's minified. I'm going to reformat it here really quick and check it out. it automatically added that script tag. So notice over here, I've literally just got this H1, but over here, boom, it added that script tag automatically. Pretty rad. Oh, and it also has this link here, which I accidentally left over from earlier that I don't actually need. Let's run that again. And then we will go ahead and re-serve this file. See what happens. And there it is. It works. And if we look at our source, there it is. Pretty cool, right?
Very cool.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions?
So you're just taking off like an HTML, like a full HTML file. Could you take like just a specific section of an HTML file, or can you like make it more modular than just the whole file? Or would the standard approach be to just use like a index.html and then do all your,
I guess it would depend on
rendering?
It would depend on what your project is. So like with React, you only need the one file, right? With the root.
Right.
Now Angular, you actually create little individual HTML files. And so yes, you could basically you would just in your configuration write how to handle certain file types. And I'm glad you asked that question, because that segues perfectly into what we're going to go into next, which is like, okay, suppose I need to customize behavior. But yeah, so the short answer to your question is yes, you can do that. And I'm going to show you where you start as far as doing stuff like that. So let's say that I want to be able to add some CSS, right? So let's look at some plugins that are available here. All right, so there's several different ones. I forget. Oh wait, sorry, let me look at the loaders. So we're gonna look at asset management. Okay, here we go. So suppose we want to be able to, do something with our code, or do something with some CSS, without having to manually add links and references to our dist folder. Well, there are what are called loaders. So I'm going to introduce to you two really common ones. We've got style loader and CSS loader. And I will explain what these are doing. Okay, so if we look at, we're gonna take a look at this guy. I'm just gonna copy this because I'm lazy. Okay. So this property module defines the rules and configurations for how to process a particular bundle as it encounters it. Okay, so our rules here, as you can see, are just defined by an array. Okay, so this can be arbitrarily long. And what this means is, what this is saying is test the file name using this string matcher, and you'll notice that that's regex. Doesn't have to be, but it's the most useful. So let's look at what this is saying. If you were here for my regex lesson last week, you can see that this is checking for any string that ends in .css.
Actually, did you tape that? Did you record that regex class?
It is recorded, yes. I'm not sure if it has been uploaded to YouTube yet, though.
Okay, that's fine.
It hasn't been uploaded as of
Okay.
earlier today, but
Okay, that's cool.
Okay, I'll make sure to remind Matt to upload that.
No worries. Cool.
Yeah. Cool. So what this is saying is anytime you see a CSS file, or more specifically, anytime you see a file that matches this pattern, that's a more accurate way of saying it, then do this thing. Just to tell you kind of why I wanted to be more precise, it's because I could do something like this. Which says this theoretically would allow me to treat certain kinds of CSS files differently, which is pretty cool. So this gives me the ability to really fine tune how I want to treat different modules. So in this case, we're just saying, okay,
this is only specific to CSS, or really
any
anything
file
you
type,
match,
whatever you match.
Use that. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yep. So it's 100% configurable. There's infinite possibilities, which is pretty cool. All right. So, and this use function is just saying, essentially, what do you want to do with this? If I see a CSS, if I see a file that matches this pattern, it just says, okay, now use those things, process it using those things, whatever those are. Now, this array of strings just simply says, okay, it assumes that it'll basically search for that package in your node modules. If you do it by name, you can also put in functions, I believe. So if you really wanted to customize what you're doing, you can provide functions as well. So let's test this. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a folder called assets. And inside of assets, we'll just make a file called styles.css. Okay. So what we're going to do now. Oh, see, Lanny. Okay, so now what we're going to do is let's give this h1 a class, but we're going to do it dynamically. Okay, so we're going to say h1, or we're going to do let's call this header color red. Okay, over here. Get rid of that guy, and now we're going to import. You know what? Let me before I do that, I'm gonna start with just a very simple, even simpler, just h1 color red. Okay, and we're just gonna do a very simple. Here's our assets. Here's our styles.css. Okay.
Why would you import in the JavaScript file versus the HTML template?
So remember, ahead of time, we don't know what these links are going to be. We don't know what the name of those files are going to be yet. And if we were doing like CSS bundles and stuff, it does all that hashing and crap, and we just don't want to. We want this template to be as bare as possible. Any references to files and scripts and links and stuff, we want to be taken care of by Webpack.
Got it. So it's going to add that.
Yes. So
And
basically,
it knows to put it in the right place because
yep.
yeah.
Because what Webpack does is anytime it sees an import or a require, it knows to then look at the configuration and see what to do with it. So in this case, it's saying, oh, look at this. This is a CSS file, or this pattern matches this file name. So I'm going to put it through the process that these loaders do. And what these do is exactly what you expect. Is it bundles the CSS together and attaches style tags or link tags to the HTML so that we don't have to do it. We don't have to manually do that. So let's see if it works. So we're going to go ahead and run our thing. Okay. Oh, I'm not sure what that means. I haven't seen that before. Must be a update. Anyways, okay, so looks like it did some stuff. Okay, cool. Looks like there's no problems. Let's look at what we got back. Okay. Okay. Nothing looks particularly different. Let's see what our document looks like. Oh, and that. Check it out, it's red. So, oh, I remember. Sorry, by default, those loaders actually do inline styling. So that's why you don't see any. That's why you don't see any link tags here. It literally does all the styling like inline. But you can tell it. You can tell it to. You can configure it to create link tags if you want. You know, there's all sorts of stuff you can do with it if we wanted to. So we could add configurations, which I won't worry about right now. Okay, so does that make sense so far? Does anybody have any questions about that?
Oh, makes sense to me.
Cool. Now there's some other really cool things you can do with this. So for example, let's say I wanted to do some sort of like CSS module kind of thing where I define my styles here. So instead of this H1, we now are just going to define class names. Okay, cool. So we, of course, could then say h1.classList.add, and then we could say, you know, red, for example. And because we're importing our styles, oh, and then let's bundle it. Next thing I'm going to show you is how to make this automatically refresh every time. Okay, sweet, still red. Let's do a sanity check. See if it turns blue this time. Hey, there it is. Okay, it works. Beautiful. Okay, we can even do other stuff, such as, let's say we want to import these names directly. So instead of implicitly saying blue, we're going to now import styles from, and now we can say styles dot. And we'll bundle that guy, and let's do red so we can, so it's easier to tell that this actually worked. Oh, there's a step I'm missing. There's a step I'm missing, and I totally forgot what that is. Let's do a little thing really quick.
I think you can prettier that at the bottom left corner.
Yes, that, and then we can, this also is not that helpful.
Yeah, maybe not.
All right, so notice, this actually is a good little lesson. So notice how hard this is to read. Suppose I want to be able to still debug what I'm doing, right? Well, why don't we tell our Webpack to use source. And then what I'm gonna do is, I believe it's called source map. Okay, so this will create source maps, I believe. What the hell's it called? Let me look this up again. Oh, sorry, it's called dev tool, not source. Let's bundle this guy again. And check it out. Now it just made a source map that we can now use to where is the, there we go. Now we can put some breakpoints in here so it's a lot easier to read. Okay, so it looks like it's just an empty object. All right, I'm not really sure why that's working. I'm gonna have to, there's a step I'm missing in here that I am forgetting.
Is it styles.color or no? No, probably not.
I don't think so.
Yeah, probably not.
Because this object doesn't have any, it's just an empty object.
Yeah.
So it's showing up as undefined.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm not sure why that is not working. I'll look that up later. So,
Yeah.
okay, we're currently in a situation though where I keep having to like run the bundle manually. Or I keep having to run the bundler manually, which is kind of annoying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let me put this back to so like I don't want to have to keep doing this.
Yeah.
I want to be able to code, save my code, and then instantly see the results of my code, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that be nice? So there is, of course, a tool that lets us do that. Oh, go away. Go. Okay. Beautiful. So we can use, there's a couple options. There's what's called watch mode. So let's see what that does. So if I go over here and I set my property to watch, let's see what happens. So check it out. It's kind of hanging now.
Yeah.
So if I go over here and I switch this to red and I hit save, check it out. It automatically does it. And then I go over
Nice.
here, hey, it's red again. So that's kind of, that's the simplest way. It's not always the best way. There's also what's called the Webpack Dev Server, which is very similar to Live Server in the sense that it's like a little mini utility server that will automatically detect file changes and rebundle. But it's a little bit more heavy duty than using just watch mode. And it's really, really easy to set up. You just install it, and then you can give it some configurations, and it'll just work. So let's do that really quick. Well, I don't want to worry about that right now. This is good enough for now. The watch mode, it's perfectly acceptable. So what you've seen so far is basically these are the basics of Webpack. So it's simply just a set of rules that define how to get from point A to point B. And there's other configurations too, like source maps and things like that, that you can do to help you, put in breakpoints and just help you develop generally. Inline Source Map, I believe, is the one I wanted to do. So if I go back over here, go in here, source, go here. Not sure why that's going there and not here. Okay, there we go. So we can see what's on the page and stuff. So we can use the debugger, and it will use our files, or we can put breakpoints in our source code, despite the fact that we're actually executing bundled minified code, which is nice. I'm gonna rerun my Webpack so that I'll take into account the new my new settings. There we go. Pretty cool.
So that's
Cool.
working now.
Yeah. So let me refresh. There it is. So there's my document. There's my H1 tag. Here's my inner text. Now, what I wanted to do was the CSS bundle thing. So that was in the asset management. And then as you can see, if you want to load in pictures and stuff, same thing. You just specify the file extension using regex and provide it the right rules and stuff, and it'll work. Usually, I mean, it took me some time to kind of get used to all the different plugins and loaders and stuff that are available. But at the end of the day, all you're doing is just defining rules for whatever thing you're trying to do. So it's cool. There's even a TypeScript loader. So if I wanted to, I could use this TypeScript loader, so that I could write using TypeScript, and then it would bundle into normal JS like it is here. Pretty cool.
Cool.
Let's see here. Fonts, again, same kind of thing. CSV files, XML, all that. You can do anything. It's pretty rad. JSON. For look something up. Webpack CSS module. So because what I wanted to be able to do is to, here we go. This is what I wanted. Modules true, which allows you to do stuff like this. So that in your code, you can import, import the actual class names directly from the CSS file. So to do that, we can just go over here. So if our CSS loader, for example, just say, CSS loader, I believe, is it options? Yeah, options, and then modules true. I believe this should work. And if not, I'll just spend some time later reminding myself how to do this because I don't do this very often. Okay, it's still not working. Oh, wait, I got it. So one thing that you'll learn is with Webpack, if you change some configuration, even though you have your watcher running, you're still running it from the instance of the Webpack config you had earlier. So if you change your Webpack config, if you want to see the results of that change, you still have to restart your thing. Okay, here we go. Now we have.
Nice.
Now we have
Cool.
our what we wanted. So that's pretty cool. And that's just plain JavaScript and CSS. And so what React does is, if you were to look at the Webpack config that they used, it's pretty ridiculous. It's huge. But it follows the same pattern. Basically, it's looking for, I believe it uses CSS loaders under the hood. I don't remember actually. But it also has ways of parsing SVGs, PNGs, PDFs. There's stuff for, I believe, audio and video files, so like MP3, stuff like that. All those are just baked into the configuration here. So next time you see this, you won't be afraid of it, because now all you know, now you know at the end of the day, all it's doing is converting individual files into bundles using these rules with these configurations. So yeah, that's Webpack.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. What would you say the difference between like a Webpack and a parcel, or like, I feel like there's like some like snowflake one or
Yeah,
snowball.
there's several. So to be honest, I've only actually used Webpack. I know that they all solve the same problem. I think they just do it in different ways, and I haven't used the other ones enough to know what one is, better, quote unquote. I think it probably just depends on what you're trying to do. I'm sure there's pros and cons to everything. I've heard some people complain about Webpack being so like verbose and fat, which to me, I don't know. I don't care. I like how customizable it is, and it's intuitive enough to me that I have no complaints about it. I've never really had any problems with it. I was really curious one day to know how the hell how Create React app worked, and so I went ahead and tried to build my own little mini version of Create React app, and with just I hit some snags here and there, but for the most part, it was fairly straightforward. It just took me a couple of days of reading through the documentation and stuff to get like a basic Create React app template working.
Mm.
So,
'Cause what's
I like
the
it.
what's the real magic there?
The real magic.
With the Create React app, is it that you get that sort of all those what runs like npm start scripts that
Right. Yeah. So like, for example, here I'd have my, so in this case, it's practically just like this, where if I were to, let's run this again. Oh, oops, now I don't have it. So if I do npm start, hey, look at that. Now it's doing this thing. Sweet. Yay. Like, it's essentially doing exactly what I am used to doing in React, right?
Yep.
Like, oh no, I want to change that to blue. Oh, hey, it's blue, yay. But I mean, their implementation is very, very complicated and very, I don't know, it's just very configured and convenient. But really all they're doing is they have a set of scripts. So when you actually run Create React app, when you run npx Create React app, it's not actually, if you've ever noticed, if you've ever looked, you don't actually ever see a webpack.config file, right? Like you don't see a dist, you don't really see some of this stuff. And that's just because they're running scripts. When you run npm run start, if you look at the package JSON of a Create React app, it says start, and then it says, I believe, React scripts something or React Dev scripts or something. So that script is living in node modules, and that script effectively does all this shit. Like I believe it contains, I believe all this is kind of like buried in there. So it's kind of hidden away. And then there is a command called eject, where if you run the command npm run eject, it basically will expose all those files into your project, and it'll look like this. And then you can like manually tweak the configurations and stuff. So I highly recommend just downloading Create React app, create a little, start a little project, run the command npm run eject, and just look at it. I don't expect you to know what's going on. It's kind of crazy. I'll be honest with you. It's just a lot of stuff. The file is huge and it's just kind of insane. But I think it's cool to just get a glimpse. It's kind of like, like people who use Create React app most of the time are like people that can drive a car, but the moment they open up the hood of their car, they don't know what the hell to do. It's kind of what it's like running npm run eject. It's kind of like opening the hood and you're like, oh god. I was very humbled the first time I did that.
Cool.
But yeah.
All right, what's on tap for next week?
Next week, I'm actually doing something a little different than I have been. It's not a particular library or like concept per se, but it's more a discussion. It's going to be more of a philosophical discussion about kind of the art of coding generally. I think it'll be really interesting. So the topic is called, I believe I called it the Art of Abstraction or something like that. I forget what I called it. One sec, let me look it up.
Cool. That should be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me find it. I think that's next week, unless let's see, Webpack, and then, oh, it's not listed on the events page yet. Should be though for February. I wonder if he's posted it for February yet. No, he hasn't posted it for February yet. One sec, I can still find it. Oh, okay. Sorry. So next week there's one in between. So next week I'm gonna be going back to like the basics. We're gonna be talking about expressions, values, operators, and statements. And I think even though it's the basics, sometimes going back to the very bare bones basics can be very illuminating. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the difference between expressions, values, operators, and statements. Not the sexiest topic in the world, but I think very useful because they're like literally the foundation of coding. So,
Cool.
and then the week after is called, I called it the Art of Abstraction. So we're going to talk about just like more like coding patterns as opposed to like coding concepts, like kind of ways of thinking as opposed to like information about things. So I think it'll be cool.
Great.
Well, I'm taking off. Have a good night, guys. Thanks.
All righty, you're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Word.
right.
Well, do you have any questions or anything? Are you good?
I think I'm all set. Yeah, appreciate the demo. That kind of gives me enough to maybe be dangerous or at least get that in the future.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, Webpack's pretty fun.
All about the config.
Oh, yeah. You're not a real coder until you create a config file.
All right. Well, have a good week, Ben.
All right, man. We'll see you next week.
All right. Bye.
See ya.